Well, I don't know what to say. Frank is quite something. I think you would agree. And to those of you who are here, both live and by technology, when we talk about Anglo-Saxons, I always think it's really odd when we think if you were an Anglo and you heard me speak of Anglo-Saxons, I wonder if you would like that, or maybe that would hurt your feelings. I'm not saying they were ultra sensitive, but I don't feel that they were exactly kissing cousins, if you know what I mean, because there is as much fighting and conflict among these folks. I find it very ironic, not to mention the Jews. They always get sort of left out, Anglo-Saxon, and you think of those Jutes, Jutes, I think. But what about us? They're part of it too. But the truth of the matter is, the term Anglo-Saxon, representing the Germanic peoples of Scandinavia who became so significant in English history, has come down to us. You'll notice I put the term invasions in quotation marks because, and I have to ask my consultant Helga here, because I'm going to say it and then you can do it correctly for the class. Okay, get ready. Oh, I'm so embarrassed in front of Helga. Volker Wanderungen. I know, not even close enough. Not, I know that's South German. That's my excuse. Yeah, and I'm sticking with it. Wanderings of the people. Now say it correctly for them. Volker Wanderungen, is that about right? Thank you. Oh, thank you, Herr Drake. Yes, I'm sure that, yeah. Okay. But the idea is that the Germanic peoples may well have had reasons, kings who sought peace or for other reasons decided to migrate to other places. And they considered, I guess, the British Isles to sort of be the Palm Beach of their world. I mean, it's like go south and so fertile and all the possibilities of that would come about. And why do they do this? Well, let's see what the sources tell us. Starting, of course, with a very unhappy monk. And monks should be happy, spread. Well, they're spreading the word and they're happy and thinking about the future in heaven. But we're going to hear about one who wasn't so happy because he was a Celtic monk and they got some bad times. Yeah. You think, well, how did the Celts feel about the Romans? Well, I'm thinking maybe not great, but a lot better than they would now. Why do we think that? Well, let's just hear what he has to say. Meanwhile, we understand that these Anglo-Saxon, shall we say, tours of the British Isles without going home are part of this general Germanic move southward, which had more or less taken over what had been the Western Roman Empire. And I know that there's a particular person here who always lights up when I say 476. Yeah, because she always knows. For those who may not, I'll just say Romulus Augustulus, and that will bring you in fully to understanding the whole West being taken over, more or less. Taking over in the sense of ruling. So, I mean, the poor outlier British Isles. That had been going on for a while. You know, the Romans had moved out. They said, it's been real. We've loved being here. It's been great. Can you imagine? Even Roman veterans, I guess, who had settled down there, perhaps with, I don't know, Celtic special friends, gal pals, whatever they say, and said, honey, I love you very much, but I need to get back to Italy. And food here is really bad. Whatever the reason, that has definitely changed. Notice the use of the word murky. Yeah, I choose my words carefully, but I do think murky is a good word for it. I mean, there's some clarity, as we'll see, but by and large, there are centuries there when really the details are not known because there is no Tacitus for this period. No one who's going to say, yeah, this time seems really bad, and gosh, we miss the Romans, and maybe they would like to come back, and we can some Celtic Roman relationship. No, it's all over, but we really don't know. What we do know is our unhappy monk. And you think I'm making it up, but look at it. I know. You know that you had that put on a happy face. Remember that? I sing it in my shower. The idea of cohorts is this is Gildas. Your book speaks of a scathing polemic. And can you imagine somebody describes your writing as a scathing polemic? That would not be a happy piece, would it? We wouldn't want that in the Plainsman. We would want, we're happy at Auburn. We love Auburn very much, that kind of thing. But Gildas was very unhappy. Gildas was a Celtic monk. And we'll talk about Christianity at a subsequent talk, but right now, it's just important to know that he lived part of his life there in Britain, and he would go on to Brittany, Celtic area of France. I mean, for monastic purposes. I mean, he wasn't going to start a new life or get another job or get married. I mean, he was going to be part of a monastic group there. But this was what he becomes, I think, most famous for. It's not so much that it's great writing as it's the only source in town as far as having a writing source. And he talks, of course, not positively, like we fought the good fight and went down, but we're so proud of our Celts and all they did to try to preserve our homeland. None of that. This is like, you let us down. And you are very wicked. Speak of the, devil, I was about to say. Here's a quotation from Gildas. And you say, I'm not showing this as historical prose talk because it's not great, because the next historian I'm talking about, well, I'd give him a C-, and I'd give the next one A. I mean, a C is okay. But an A is great. You have to understand. And don't feel bad. Sometimes I use the brackets because they don't name them. Notice the wolves in sheepfold. Oh, they love those analogies. And you're thinking he's sitting there and he's studying. He's thinking, ooh. And who are these? I would never want to call you impious. I will not. Those are hurtful words. Because look at that, though. he is anti-Saxon. He's not saying reach out and touch. Maybe we can join each other for mass or do something. Maybe we can have an ecumenical session. None of that. He is definitely not ecumenical. They are fierce and impious. And I think you're wondering, rate my invaders. I mean, they are getting top 5 in terms of wickedness. God doesn't even like them. Yeah, I mean, how can we talking loser, capital L, right? Hateful both to God and to me. So you're thinking, how bad can you get? Well, I think we spell it Saxon. And nothing was ever so pernicious. I know. I hear groans. Because you would never say anybody was pernicious. You would use more positive ways of reaching people. Pernicious. What palpable darkness. Think about the translators. They're showing off their high verbal skills. Yeah. But of course, probably early 20th century, late 19th. What palpable darkness must have enveloped their minds. Darkness, desperate and cruel. The very people who, in absent they dreaded more than death itself. What had happened? The Picts, remember them? They were up north. And according to Gildas, the Saxons had been called in, and so like SOS. And they said, sure. I'm trying to use my pernicious voice. It's like, sure, we would love to come in. We want to help you. You know people, well, I'm sure maybe you don't, but I've met people like that. Wicked, evil. You stay away from them because they're rated R. They're dangerous and they wish you, but they pretend to be your friend. We want to make you secure, keep you happy. And that's according to Gildas happens to the Saxons get called in by the Celts as protection. And of course, now what happens? People going to Vegas or maybe with Tomko. No, I know. And you say, no, we don't know people like that. Well, I certainly hope not. Every kind of luxury and licentiousness, not in your county, I'm sure. But there are people of that ilk. Do you know anyone who's licentious? No, not in Lee County. There may be out there. Maybe, yeah, further west. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Dog racing and who knows what else. All of that luxury and licentiousness. And I'm thinking, really? In Celtic England, I'm thinking that's not exactly where I would be going if I want to find my center up. Babylon, it was not. Okay, if you want to go there, I can think of a lot better places than Celtic England. But supposedly they had high profits, I guess, and their stocks and bonds or whatever. Right. And so they were out. Yeah, let's go bet. Let's meet fancy folks. Maybe we can eat steak or whatever it is that the wealthy do to be bad, which is not healthy. But that happens. But besides this vice, is that not enough, you say you? There rose every other to which human nature is liable. And in particular, that hatred of truth. So you say, gee, he must have really had a down day when he wrote this. I mean, yeah, where's the sunshine? It's not like, it's very pessimistic. I think you will agree. We are lucky. There are some stories of a King Arthur type figure in his work, which doesn't necessarily make me believe there was a King Arthur, but I'm down on that. But by and large, this is like condemning the Celts. Basically, they got what was coming to them. You don't mean I don't like Anglo-Saxons. It's not that, says Gildas. But you are wicked, you're pernicious, and
Impious.
venerable. And you say, you mean we're wonderful? No. I mean, you're out for all you can get. So it's a fascinating thing to read Gildas. But it's not like fair and balanced. It's definitely on the negative side. Now, another side is presented by someone named Bede, or as we call him in Catholicism, or perhaps even in the world of history in general, the Venerable Bede. He's a saint. There's a school in Montgomery named for him, actually, St. Bede's. Some of you may know. In a church, one of the largest Catholic churches in Montgomery. And guess what? Bede was probably a grandchild of the original Anglo-Saxons. So he felt he had a lot to make up for. Because, of course, his grandfather was probably impious. He was beat up on those Celts and glad to do it. That's what we do. That's Danes and these various Anglo-Saxon peoples. In any event, we see him in his monastic garb, and he is a Benedictine. We've gone Catholic. I might add, Gildic was a Celtic Christian, which we'll talk about, but for the time being, I'll just mention that Bede was up in a place called Jarrow, which is a small place near York. And he didn't get out. He didn't get professional leaves or whatever they call it nowadays, he was going to hang out with monks from other places. He was right there. And I'm not sure, how they chose their career path and how he decided to pursue the monastic life, but I figure he was the sort who did very well on, I guess, the scholastic tests. And this was the way, if you were going to do this kind of life and not run around and kill folks or ruler, and all of that, and you were, again, academic, and you came from premier family, then I think this is where you would have gone. And you sit way up in the area of the Humber River, way up north, up near the Scottish border as we know it today. But it's interesting, though, that Bede will describe this. And of course, remember, it's in his blood. So he will see these Anglo-Saxons in a different way. Yes, he will admit they did some no-nos, his grandpa and all the others, but they brought to the previously dark Celtic Britain a new beginning. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, a new day, for Britain. And so his history, of which there will be a lot more, I'll just be honest, throughout the next few sessions, we will hear about this particular period. But again, they're both monks. And let's face it, if you want history back then, go to the monastery, because that's where it's going to come from. And we understand, of course, that a Celtic monk and Anglo-Saxon monk are going to have different stories to tell. Because now, Bede, known, and I guess this is some sort of term that somebody thought up once, and every textbook reader ever since has called him the father of English history, and I don't know. About what year was this? 7th century. So being the grandson of one of the original, and that amazes me. I don't know why you think that he would have come along, and then now he's out writing about all of this history and knowing so much, even without all those research leaves or grants. I mean, he didn't get, they didn't say, oh, Bede, you just take off, man. You don't have to go to mass, or you don't have to do any of the other services. We just want you. He was doing all of his monastic duties. Don't you worry about that. And at the same time, he was in that library. Give me a scriptorium, because I got writing to do. I imagine he was not on KP. I don't think he probably had to do too many responsibilities, clean John or any of that. I think he was probably, they had a special section in school in the day. We used to call it track 1, all the bright ones were sitting up there. Some of you know what it was like. You didn't want to hurt anybody else's feelings, but you were on the top, the elite scholastically. So that's the period. And I do think maybe he just, as far as the grandfather was concerned, thinking, well, you got to start somewhere. So that's the view that he would present, but he had to be very familiar with the coming of the Anglo-Saxons, and they weren't nice to the Celts. I'll put it that way. As you can imagine, it's not like we're glad to be here. You have a beautiful country. We're so happy we can share it with you. Yeah, I think you're aware, obviously, that is not the way it happens. Oh, Lord. Head chopping time. Yeah, I know. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Well, a chronicle reminds some of us of having diaries. And some of you remember having diaries, and you would probably talk about hairdos or L'Oreal or whatever particular remedy you would want to use, or not remedy, but improvement on something that's already very good, and just make it great. All of this chronicle has to do, and probably this was done later 9th, 10th centuries, we think. All of these different monasteries kept chronicles of events, and some scholars, monastic scholars, I dare say, brought all these chronicles together, and you think, God, I wouldn't want to have to do that. You think of some job that you don't like to do, and I can think of plenty, but I'm thinking any of the things that I don't like to do, that one I certainly wouldn't want to do. You have to kind of create a synthesis between these different chronicles. I know, as much as we love Latin, that can be very painful. And you might think, why aren't you writing it in some sort of Germanic? I don't think they're ready for that. In terms of the English language being a language of the church or a language of that kind of writing. So the chronicles were done in Latin. So somehow they brought them together in some years. There might be just something about, some astronomical phenomenon. Or maybe it will be very eventful. So like, it was a big year. It was a big year for executions and killings. What it means is that the Anglo-Saxon period was not one of give peace a chance, because as far as we understand it, it's a very violent world. As a result of which, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is not exactly something that we would find at Barnes and Noble. I mean, it's not as if people back then were rushing out to get it. I wonder what, because you understand most people are illiterate. So it's more or less, you could just imagine, for monks only. I mean, it's for people in history, of English history, of course, it's a gold mine. But there's a lot that's, a lot of people got killed. Moving on. I mean, it's not to be callous, it's just to indicate that we understand that, but it does provide events because, surprise, surprise, Anglo-Saxons have their own differences. They settle down and they want to take each other's lands like human beings. So there's a lot of fighting, and of course, it's not like anything's being watered over because we want readers to see it. Monastic chronicles tell what they've heard and they provide a source of information, but they're not trying to sell books, nor is it necessarily very interesting like the Venerable Bede, but at least he has lots of stories of what we call hagiography, lots of saints and all kinds of wonderful people. And you say, well, isn't that getting off the subject? Well, he's good at that. Those of you who read Herodotus, the Greek historian, knows how some of them do that. But it is a major source. And happily for us, you can go to the Ralph Brown Drawn Library anytime you're free, and you can peruse it. You say, wow, that is wonderful. You're glad that we can do that. So I will hold my breath while that goes on, because those are few and far between. Now, we know about works, and those of you who are literarily inclined will know about Beowulf and know about Avalon and all the rest. I like to think about this and the Arthurian works, and then I think about somebody doing touch-ups, and you think, what do you mean by touch-ups? I mean, you go in, and this is some Christian writer, and say, I think this needs a little fix. Meaning that Beowulf and much of the works that we think of as Arthurian, and you may have seen that series of, what is it they're called? They're yellow and black. And people, yes, maybe you don't know about that, but some will know exactly what I'm talking about. If you didn't want to read the Arthurian and you think, yeah, see, You know about it. And you understand, many of you would have said, nay, I want to read the full work. I don't want to take any easy steps, though I do not condemn those who choose a different path. But enough of that. Let's just note that these works seem to have been, just say, pagan. And then later on, Christian writers would try to bring in a certain element of Christianity. But I don't think enough that if you read Beowulf, and it can be rough going for those. I mean, I'm not trying to offend anyone who's loves Old English and those kinds of writings, but it can be slow. And as I like to tell the students, don't get in a lazy boy and don't have your remote. You drink something with caffeine and you sit in a straight chair, because there can be temptations. Being sloth, yes. Being captured by Morpheus, yes. The god of sleep, yeah. So all of this is to say they are important sources for understanding the Anglo-Saxons, but Anglo-Saxons, I think, from a pagan touch. Now, for the tourist. Who doesn't want to know about Sutton Hoo? You know what I did in preparation for this? And it's amazing what's out there nowadays. There was a program I saw online by a Sutton Hoo specialist, and she works at the British Museum, and I thought, she's young and brilliant. I'm thinking, wow, absolutely amazing. She was giving a lecture on a soul work from that collection. I said, only the truly devout. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I made it through the whole way. I didn't take any breaks, I promise. And and then I just thought, gosh, maybe rate my, whatever it is. But all of this was a section on the from the British Museum. I mean, they have done their homework, and you think about how far all that has gone in these decades, the studies, because you see how all this started in 1939, just, I think, weeks before the invasion of Poland, in the summer of 39. And absolutely amazing to me. Think about the advancements in archaeology, the advancements in history, and what a joy it was for the people of England in pretty gloomy times to be made aware of this advancement in their own history. So it's very, very interesting indeed. It's way over there in East Anglia. And I guess they had already had some premonitions that this would be highly significant. But apparently the landowner encouraged the digs. And of course, she's a saint too, as far as the archaeologists are concerned, because of course it was a ship, and they talk about what do they always say? You can take it with you. I mean, they're pagans, so it's not like dust to dust. It's like, I got to have my nice things. I got to have my silver, crystal, all of that. So these, you said this is something like Egyptians, isn't it? So all of this, they tell us, would have consisted of their various military accoutrements. And he was an Anglo-Saxon king of the early period. And you say, wow, those Anglo-Saxons lived mighty well. Well, I would say it's an elitist society, as we say nowadays. I don't think everyone was like that, but I don't think if you were like me, I mean, we would get a nice send off like that, unless maybe we could be the tutor of the young royalty. But this material all seems to be part of a royal collection that was going down. But think about this, how it had been preserved all those centuries. And then, of course, they learned more about the mineralogy and how advanced in some ways this Anglo-Saxon society was. And I tell you, for those of you planning trips to London, stop and seeing all this at the British Museum is well worth it. In terms of, I mean, there's just so much, but this is just part of it. And as I say, this lecture I heard, I just thought was very awing. I mean, about all she understood about archaeology and the various aspects of it. So, what would you call it? Treasures of Sutton Hoo. And Sutton Hoo is, I would think, one of the greatest sources, material sources of Anglo-Saxon history. I'm not sure every king lived that way. And again, this is presumably a burial ship. As far as the law codes are concerned, you read an Anglo-Saxon law code, and my first thought is always a Christian has been here. And you say, well, how do you know? Well, because it's in writing. That helps, because law codes would not have been in writing before Christians. It would have been just hand down material. Well, Grandpa said they did it this way, you know, that sort of thing. Somehow, and I'm hypothesizing, obviously. Yeah, I mean, like, somehow as these kings were Christianized, their advisors were Christians. And these advisors would say to them, sir, you are wise, you're wonderful. You say, kissing up, maybe? Yes, I think some serious kissing up. Your rules and regulations are so good. You know, I'd like to make a listing of them so we had a record. And, you know, this guy's out, probably going out to kill other Saxons or whatever. He said, yeah, go ahead, you know, because I'm off on a campaign. And while I'm killing and beating up on these other people, it'd be a nice project to keep you all busy after you finish your prayer services. So you get, again, it's got that little touch of Christianity. But if you want to know the truth, it's some hardcore Germanism too. Because much of that, as we will see, has to do with Germanic traditions. And you say, do we turn the other cheek? Because we love you. You did me wrong, but give me a hug. No, we're going to get you. And so in these law codes, they will talk about rejecting violence. But that means simply violence within that king's realm. Because we need to, I guess you'd say, save it up so that when we attack the enemies. So it's not I don't think anybody in there is ready for pacifism or war resistance. I think these law codes are more having to do with saying, if you attack each other and I didn't give you permission, you have done a no-no. And you know what? I'll be really irritated. And you don't want the king irritated. So the law codes are very important because they, of course, tell us what many people are aware of, that is Germanic traditions. But at the same time, and it amazes me, one of them by English king called King Edmund would start off by saying, you know, sometimes there's the laws of King Edmund rather, and we want to keep the peace as Christ has commanded. And I'm thinking, I mean, it's like reading something and you think maybe they got part of that paper from the internet. I don't know where I picked this up, but yes, I'm thinking there is evil lurks with around us. Yes, I don't know how I got that, but yes. Somehow I look at it and I say, gee, that sounds a little canned. I wonder if I can find that in another source. Yeah, happens all the time, by the way. It's that thing called Wikipedia. Yes, I don't condemn it. I'm just saying that sometimes the youth will do that. Wicked, but it happens. So basically, all of this, they give us the law codes and that little old dose of Christianity needn't fool us. Well, let's take a little break now, and then we'll come back and talk more about Germans and Christians. And Frank will keep us in line.
324, please.
Great. You married your man a lot of it. Yes.
Okay, so
Y'all
spent the day today. This morning. You're familiar with.
Oh my God. What made you go there?
That's in that.
We're in the market, if they're in Lebanon. Like 24-year-old girls. We're obtaining.
Big draw.
Like the.
They sold the company. They have them to come to their company. They made inside. Probably sitting up there and they gave everybody.
That's because they study.
Well, I know, everybody's thinking. How many cars?
Yeah, no.
And every car.
You're so right.
So that not only the parts, you know, they can't be. What else they got in cars? So every car can be tracked. So if you think something like that, they're gonna fix everything, get in the car. That they really are, but we're not going to.
We've got a source for this little town, but we can't say that everybody.
Absolutely.
Do you remember that I brought up?
The little town by the French border.
Yeah.
Yes,
and the leader.
Oh, yeah. Started
Yeah, that's kind of.
Yeah. I saw, but this is another thing, so they're going out.
You know,
What is it, horse's shoes?
your age, break roads.
Yes, I.
They're already on top.
Yeah.
Say it's normal. How do you get in?
Second wife.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, we talked about.
Oh, my.
And then involved into this.
Right, that is just amazing. I mean, not that you're old. Your boss, you're all very.
It's a learning class.
Yes, that's the way I want to.
Yeah. Well, try to like teach it. Yeah.
No.
They didn't bring out your little kid. Big.
Yes, true.
Yes. Yeah, you have.
Yeah, I knew about that.
Very small.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's so young. I was no more. What's that?
That kind of movie.
In regular, but again,
Charlton Heston.
that is fascinating.
And I think, one of them.
Oh, it's so big.
Yeah, I know.
They were some serious.
Yeah.
If you're the winner.
I met him, my husband's pasta business manager at St.
Small
Dunstan,
world.
and I met him at his, he did that cheers for the water. He was in.
There you go. One of our most brilliant PhDs.
And we actually talked about.
Yeah, well, I was a lot. Yeah.
I still want to hear about that Russian.
Yeah.
I was telling Diane,
Names, yes.
I was telling Diane that I have and I make I had like a company, a logo on everything. But I take all the names that are. So I named my degree.
Oh, yeah, no.
Oh, I hope Penny will get.
I don't think I get a lot of people understand it.
Oh, but see,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
So, have you taken any of those courses from James West?
It sounds like.
Some planes.
Like, you know, the same thing. Time about like these markets. 7 million food plots.
Yeah. They came in for Russian and Soviet history, and then they got freed up. Yeah, they got Russian and Ukrainians. And, gold, written down. And I think from what they told me.
Yeah.
And I guess he went back.
Probably safer there and going into that.
Well, that was But my Lord. It's probably pretty hard to get after this job. Yeah, but it's.
Must have done something bad.
High school. Now it leads us to France. No, that one, I was always just the idea.
Correct. She was like 17. I remember we got tabs really fast.
Okay, David. This cat. The lot. Yeah.
So when you're doing the selection,
I love, oh my God, I love that song. That's that. Oh God. Oh wow. Memories.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Time to go back to work.
Oh,
We're having too much fun over there. That's what.
Yeah, but you also.
You know, somebody has to maintain order.
Like a Saxon master.
I can even sing twice the river out.
Yes. There we go. Oh, listen, you. Oh, do I have to? Okay. I don't get another intro. No. No, you've done well enough. Yes. You've done well enough. All right. Is everybody ready and done the powder room and everything? So again, this is another one of those sources, the law codes, and you say, isn't there something a little more exciting than a law code? No offense to our legal friends, but you try to get into that and it's not always the most scintillating reading, right? So these weren't either, but this didn't necessarily concern we would call regular folk, does it? It concerns essentially the king and the upper classes. Now, it's map time. Yes, I know you cartographers out there were just waiting. And I've got good news for you. Love them. And as we take these areas, and again, we think about going west to Wales and Ireland, and maybe you have some folks over there. But if you are real lucky, and that doesn't mean all Celts, but many Celts made their way out of territories controlled by Anglo-Saxons. However, some naturally were subordinated and lived there as inferiors to the Anglo-Saxons. And Jutes, lest we forget. Wales, Brittany, and elsewhere I put. I think it's very interesting the whole area that we call Brittany and how it got its name. So you think about that, and it's a beautiful area of France. If you've been there, I know many of you have. So you will understand. I think if you went up to them and said, are you aware of your roots having to do with the migration of Celtic peoples, they might call the gendarme on you. So keep it to yourself. But it's very interesting, this particular area in Wales and maybe even further westward, like Ireland. But no doubt, getting while the getting is good, as we like to say. We understand. But I assume the Picts were unwelcomed because they had had their day in Celtic Britain, and I could not imagine that the Anglo-Saxons wanted to work with them and share. This was a very long period. And if you ever use that term, dark age, I think this would be as good a time as any to apply. Many medievalists resent the use of the term for the whole medieval period because lots and lots is known. And so there's a lot of light in many periods, but not this one. A century and a half for Anglo-Saxons to bring all this territory under their authority. And again, they love wars, so it's not like they had to fight some sort of anti-war movement or any of that. I think it's more these groups are so busy fighting each other as well as fighting against people who were already there. Whatever the case, it becomes more or less a matter now of determining the emerging of the Anglo-Saxon rules. And again, to me, much of this can be in the nature of speculation, even as we view the maps. But sort of like 500 to 800, and it's like, it is 300 years. And I did mention 800 before, and think about Bede now, 7th century. So Bede is come and gone. And you think during all that period, go red, huh? You look at that, because clearly, in terms of areas, the people, Celts, are definitely losing control. And on we go to Wales. This Welsh area, and I know many of you have been to Wales, and some of you may take Welsh 101, but could you, and believe me, You are impressive. I give you all the credit. Those of us who know a little French or Spanish, we are nothing in comparison with you Welsh. Yikes. Whenever I think, do you remember on the Crown when the now King Charles?
Yep.
Yeah. Lord have mercy. On that basis alone, he got a lot of credit, and they were kind of ugly to him, at least in the film. But it was a big deal to be able to spout out some Welsh, even if you did it with an English accent, which I'm sure was not very popular. But the idea of having a separate Welsh culture, that will take time, obviously. And meanwhile, the people of our concern, that is, the people who are going to create England, go venerable be, because as you can imagine, if you run around with Welsh people, don't say, would you like to get a copy of Bede and you can study it? Because I don't think they're not pro Bede, okay? They need their own interests. But if you are with these English folks, yes, because this is the story as Bede sees it of, God's intervention, Nat, and the idea of the creation of England as a kingdom dedicated to the service of God. And what does that say about pigs? Not so much. Maybe just sort of like we had to get through that and work through it. I love this painting, although it's a little cheesy. I'm not an art person. It's 19th century, in case you wonder. And it's in, I think some smaller art museum in England, but so don't rush to, but it does indicate this is called the yoke of the Romans. In other words, and you look at those fellas and you think, gosh, gee, this is what I signed up for. Yeah, wish I'd stayed at home and stayed a civilian, because this would have been very unpleasant. And you remember we talked about Tacitus and his description of his father-in-law and the pacification of the people. And what I want to show you is, of course, Tacitus is so great. And you say, I've read that. Do I have to stop? No, you do not. In order that you are filled with Tacitus, you can go on to the Germania, because this will be, it's only 100 pages. I know, filled with joy. It's a penguin, and you can get the double edition. It will have both the biography of his father-in-law and the Germania. This, of course, provides us this Germania. The Germans, it could be translated, with the state of the Germanic society as it existed before Christianity. Now, we all change, even hair. But we also know that as far as understanding the Germans, and that is all the Germanic peoples, because remember, it's not just the Angles and Saxons. it's kind of y'all come, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, Burgundians, Vandals, yeah, the bad boys,
Yeah.
Franks,
Worse.
on and on. But we understand these are what we call generalizations. And Tacitus makes them, and I always make the point that while some people say it's a romantic description, it doesn't mean Tacitus wanted to be one. It's like he's, in some ways, trying to be like an anthropologist. But he's also, while he describes the Germans, he may have met some, well, he wasn't a warrior, so might have met them as enslaved people in Rome, perhaps, or maybe he talked to veterans. Remember, a lot of veterans were Germans themselves. So it said, Hans there, tell me about some of your experiences. You know, you must have really enjoyed your time in the Roman service. And yeah, love being, when you're a veteran, you want to make sure you get your veterans benefits. And so you understand how important this is. So basically, a lot of this is based on what he was told. You know, he's not going like, gosh, I can't wait to go up there and visit with him. He's got a good life down in what is now Italy. So he's not saying, gosh, I would love to move up there. I just think he was a true Italian, this Tacitus. So what he knows then is secondary knowledge, and he'll get in there, as people will do in their writings, and we see them today, not exactly sticking to things. They'll get in their views of something that is contemporary, and you say, how did this come up? Well, see this all the time. I do in newspapers and whatnot. Basically, what he was doing was this. And this will sound hurtful, but he didn't mean it to be hurtful, except Domitian. That's me spitting. He did not like Domitian. And we're going to talk more about Roman emperors when I can. But for now, we just can't wait for those 5 good emperors. He didn't know. And Domitian was the son, the loser son, the wicked son, according to Tacitus, of the great emperor Vespasian. That's not our problem. Our problem is to understand that he will get into sometimes talking about the Germans with their purity and love. They live in swampland, and you know, it's like somewhat romanticized, because then he'll say, but us Romans, sometimes we are really bad, because he'll mention German women and how German women are not so much married to one man, but married to the state of marriage. Yeah, and I know in this day and age, that sounds a little hokey, but the idea was Roman women are, as they used to say in the old South, fast. And they don't practice chastity. Yes, they might, I don't mean to talk about anything that's salacious, but they could be debauched. I know. This has been a real X-rated day, and I'm going to clean it up next time, I promise. But yeah, make this more of a Disney class. But let's look at some of these points. And again, you know, sometimes when I go over a list of things like that, I think, why is this different than any kind of people at that stage of evolution? And the answer is probably not much. So if you're wondering from something you learned in Anthropology 101, I think you pretty much got it. I mean, there are variations on a theme, as they say in music, but I think by and large, the idea of these tribes and the clans with the various families and in-laws, and y'all come and let's all get together, and then our clan fights against yours, that feels or maybe even Czechs and Slovaks. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Slovak.
Feuds. And that, oh, those law codes. They're all about those feuds. Because you did this to my family and you're going to get it. I may not do it to you, but I'm going to find your cousin. And it will hurt. Yes. He might even get a bruise. I mean, it's really serious. So all of this, and of course, you got the warrior class, and that is their job because they're not busy learning literacy or taking historical structure or whatever. They don't have to worry about that. They can just work farming. Because we always think about your Germanic society and the warriors, and you do realize that's a very elite group, like the sociologists would talk, and you say, gee, all these youthful Germans saying, I'm going to be a warrior someday. No, you're not. You're going to be a peasant and work. And you're going to work. I mean, it's like limited opportunities. So if somebody tells me career opportunities, you're probably going to be working in the fields. And again, not surprisingly, Tacitus doesn't talk a lot about that, but he does talk about the warriors and the chieftains and their relationship in the comitatus, meaning the warriors' devotion to their lord, and how important that is in Germanic society, and the interrelationships created by the women who marry into a different family. And sometimes we will find out that the women are utilized not only for connections between families, relationships, but even maybe an interfaith relationship. And you say, wow, what a wonderful coming together. That's very touching. Not really. I think it has more to do with the relationships of the families. Oh, and the Virgils. We never forget that. That's the way we settle differences. If we don't want to fight, you got a Virgil. So if you don't want to fight, we can check with the authorities on compensation. And it depends. Who did you hit or who did you hurt? And we can compensate. And you say, does that require deliberation? Oh, yes. You go to court and you tell me, yeah. Because that's all determined in very, very complex ways. It amazes me. You get a certain part of the anatomy, depending on who you are, your class, your sex, and all that, they're all different Virgils in terms of compensation. And again, you say, but they don't have money. Yeah, but we got livestock, crops. Yeah, we have ways of paying off. The ordeals and other forms of justice, like we can have oaths, see how many oath takers you can get, I can get more. And you say, well, all this sounds crude. Yeah, we're talking seriously crude. So, obviously, a sophisticated, and again, we're talking the 2nd century of the Roman Empire, and Tacitus was from the elite. So we're not surprised. He looks at this and said, I get burst out and born free or something like that. It's like, that whole idea of he wouldn't have wanted to live there, but he found something refreshing about it. Remember Margaret Mead and Samoa? I mean, it's like it's like, this is just so wonderful. Everybody seems so happy. And that's a deal. Now, Tacitus was not a Christian, And these people were not Christian either. So they're all, the big P, pagans. And they are hardcore. At this point, I don't think they're on the verge of anything. And they are polytheistic, I think fair to say. You got a new one? We're up for expansion. I mean, it's like the more the merrier, right? You got a new god, I can hang out. As we saw last time in Bath and talking about Minerva, it's like these various gods will come along. That's not a problem because the various gods, they like us, we're the best, Especially if we go to that pep rally, they're on our side, the gods. But the idea again of the Romans, and we wonder about Tacitus, because officially the various Roman gods, and we all had to learn them in school, I suppose, Jupiter and Juno, etc., that they were simply imposed, so it was no big deal. After all, though, in terms of how this will affect the development of Anglo-Saxon, because at this point, none of the Germanic people were saying, but we all want to come together and create some great Germanic nation, or even want to create some Anglo-Saxon nation. It's like you got to have the imagination, I guess, to do it, to be able to bring it about. But these are the characteristics that they would have. And here, these areas, see all that green? That's very Celtic, isn't it? And then when we look at the white, I always find that very interesting. You notice the date, 700 AD, so we are pretty much in that stage I was speaking on, Bede's day. And he would have lived up there. Lindsay, I was interested they put that in there. And you know what Lindsay is? Also ran. It wasn't one of the top 7. It almost made it, but didn't make the cut. But he got him, I know, he got on the map. Should have been us. But here's the so-called heptarchy, and that term heptarchy, every Anglo-Saxon history class always mentions the heptarchy. And I can just imagine, 7 kingdoms. And I'm thinking, I don't think those folks running around and say, gosh, I'm glad we're in the heptarchy and give unity a chance. You ain't having you, my brother. And all. I seriously doubt that. But these kingdoms, and I think Warren Hollister was so funny, we got a Wessex and the Sussex and the Essex, but
East and
not,
west and south.
no 6. I know, awful pun, but it's like that was so humorous. You got 3 sexes like the meaning Saxon kingdoms. And what I think is happening is these kingdoms have these fights, and we're going to take this. Yeah, you and who else? This is what it comes down to. And it's not like some sort of, well, since we're talking about New York and the UN, we're not talking about people respecting each other and saying, I really glad we could be neighbors and share this. Because I'm thinking, wouldn't you say the Mercia, Wessex, and Northumbria? What's Northumbria? There's a lot of sheep now, but I'm not sure back then there was much up there, and there was the remains of Hadrian's Wall, but I'm not thinking they were ready to turn it into a nice tourist site. Yeah, it's just there. And then East Anglia and Kent, because we know Canterbury. All of this is to say these kingdoms seem to have survived because they had sufficient resources to defend themselves and maintain an uneasy truth. Because I'm not thinking there was ever any time like, can we all be friends? I mean, it's just not in our nature. Okay. We've got to fight. I mean, you don't want to grow up the next generation to be like pacifists or something. I mean, how are you going to get work on society of that sort? So all of these then seem to have been based on the abilities of those who ruled them to maintain control. So you got those 7 kingdoms. And again, that's why Northumbria, you go, wow, look at all that. But a lot of it, is just the wool and not a lot of action. And you want some action, like I've said from the beginning, go south, as many of you know, not as much now. Well, I think we can stop there and we will pick it up next time and hear more about this Anglo-Saxon society and its history. Thank you very much.